Welcome. Whether it's your first time or you've been here before, maybe you're tucked in under New York lights, listening quietly in Tokyo, or letting Cairo's night breeze drift in. Wherever you are, I'm glad you're here. People from around the world come here to rest, to dream, and to time travel with their imagination. So, do these stories help you sleep? Tell me where you're listening from. Every message reminds me, this isn't just history. It's a shared journey. Now, close your eyes and let the past whisper you to sleep. And today, I promise to take you even further back, to one of the most feared and admired men in history. A man who was born into chaos and rose to command the greatest land empire the world has ever seen. This is the story of Genghis Khan. Not just the conqueror, but the child, the outcast, the survivor, and the storm that changed history. Before we speak of the man who conquered half the known world, before the screams of empires being crushed under hooves, before the rivers ran red and cities were ash, there was a sky. The Mongols called it Tengri, the eternal blue sky. To them, it was not just heaven, it was God. And beneath that endless sky, on the wind-bitten steppes of Central Asia, a child was born. A child named Temujin. The year was 1162. In the remote wilderness near the Onan River, Temujin came into the world. His birth was no ordinary one. His mother, Holen, groaned in pain inside a felt tent, a ger, simple and round. The earth outside was hard, the wind sharp like knives. When she finally gave birth, the midwives gasped. Temujin came out clutching a blood clot in his fist. Among the Mongols, this was no small omen. It meant that this child was destined to rule and to bring death. Temujin's father was Yasuge, leader of the Borjigin clan, a respected warrior. He had once helped unite other tribes to fight the Tatars, ancient enemies of the Mongols. But this was no empire. It wasn't even a kingdom. Mongolia was a land of chaos. Dozens of nomadic tribes lived in constant war, raiding and killing over herds, wives, and pride. There were no cities, no written language, and no central power. Only survival, only strength. To live in the steppe was to live with the wolves. But Temujin's story doesn't begin with just his birth. It begins with abduction. Years before Temujin was born, his father Yasuge had stolen his mother Holen from another tribe. She was already married. But Yasuge attacked her caravan, killed her husband, and took her as his bride. This was the way of the steppe. Holen, though a victim of war, became a fierce and wise woman. She would shape her son's soul, even more than his warrior father. Yasuge was respected, even feared. He once helped raise a powerful Mongol leader, a man named Togrul, later known as Wang Khan. Yasuge had alliances, friends, enemies. But most of all, he had a target on his back. Temujin grew up with 7 siblings, full and half-brothers. He was closest to Khazar and Temujin. But most of all, his half-brother Bektar became his enemy. More on that later. As a boy, Temujin didn't know wealth. They moved constantly. He was being raised not as a child, but as a wolf cub. When Temujin was just 9 years old, his father made a decision. It was time to find a bride. Yasuge took young Temujin on a long journey to the Angarat tribe. There, he met a girl named Bort. She would become his wife. His queen, his greatest anchor. But not yet. Temujin was left with her family to grow bonds as tradition demanded. But as Yasuge rode home alone, he stopped to eat with Tatar warriors. Disguised, he didn't tell them who he was, but they recognized him, and they poisoned his drink. Yasuge died days later, vomiting blood, alone. And when news reached Temujin, his world collapsed. Without Yasuge, Temujin's family had no protection. The other clans turned their backs. They took the family's herds, tents, and honor, and left them to starve. Temujin, his mother Hoylun, and his siblings lived like wild animals, digging for roots, eating rats, sometimes going days without food. One winter, they ate frozen cow dung just to stay alive. But Hoylun would not let them die. She hunted herself, taught the boys to fight, told them, "You are wolves. Never forget your blood." And Temujin never did. As they grew older, Temujin's half-brother Bektair began to assert control. He hoarded food, treated the others as inferiors. Temujin and his full brother Kasar had enough. One day, they confronted Bektair, armed with bows. They argued, and then Temujin shot him in the chest. He killed his own brother, cold, calculated. Later in life, he would say, "It is better to be feared than divided." That day, Temujin chose order over blood. Word of Temujin's growing strength spread. The Taya-Chi-Ud, a rival Mongol tribe, saw him as a threat. One night, they raided his camp, chained him by the neck, dragged him in front of their chief, and laughed. Temujin was now a slave. He wore a wooden collar designed to humiliate and restrict him. But he waited, watched, made friends with a sympathetic guard, and one night, he escaped. When he returned to his family, he didn't just return as a survivor, he returned as a future king. Temujin began forging alliances. He reached out to Togrul Wang Khan, his father's old blood brother, and to his childhood friend Jamuka, who had become a powerful warlord. Together they began to challenge the old Mongol ways. No more power for just nobles, no more rule by bloodline. Only strength, loyalty, and merit. Temujin wasn't just building an army. He was building a new world. A child born clutching blood, raised in exile, abandoned, betrayed, and enslaved. Yet already, the fire had begun to rise. The boy Temujin had survived the impossible, but to become Genghis Khan, he would need to burn the world. When Temujin's father, Yasuge, was poisoned by the Tartars, it was not just a man who died. It was the protection of a family. The weight of his absence didn't fall on the ground. It fell on a child. Temujin was only 9, and suddenly he was not the son of a leader, he was the son of no one. The other Mongol families, once allies, looked upon Yasuge's widow and her children, and saw them as burdens. The Taya-Chi-Ud clan, powerful and proud, had once followed Yasuge's lead. But now that he was gone, they made their choice. They came to Hoylun's camp one morning. No warning, no mercy. They stripped the family of their animals, took the tents, even stole cooking pots and knives, then turned and rode away, leaving a woman and her children in the middle of the steppe, alone, exposed, and forgotten. Temujin was now an orphan in all but name. He would never forget that betrayal. He would make sure the world didn't forget it either. Hoylun did not cry. She didn't ask for help. She didn't plead with the sky. She acted. She gathered wild onions and berries. She dug roots from frozen earth. She taught her children how to snare birds and catch rats. They survived on dried bones, the marrow sucked out again and again. Their fires were weak, their clothes thin, but each night she told stories, not of comfort, not of peace, but of strength. "Your father died proud," she said. "He rode with kings. You are his blood. Survive now, rule later." Temujin's hunger was not just for food, it was for revenge and power. The steppe was not empty. Other nomads roamed nearby, some hostile, others opportunistic. At night, Temujin would sit awake beside the fire, a sharpened stick in hand, listening. One night, horses approached. Raiders. Temujin and his brother Kasar prepared to fight. But Hoylun stepped out alone, with her hands raised. The strangers hesitated. She spoke calmly with wisdom. They left. This was Hoylun's strength, words as sharp as steel. Among Temujin's siblings, cracks began to show. His half-brother Bektair started hoarding meat, taking more than his share, acting as if he were head of the family. Temujin challenged him, but Bektair would not back down. And in the world of the steppe, there is no room for division. One day, Temujin and Kasar armed themselves with bows. They confronted Bektair in the hills. An argument broke into action. Temujin loosed an arrow. It pierced Bektair's heart. He had just killed his brother. His mother wept in rage, but Temujin did not.
A single shadow weakens the fire, he said.
A divided house cannot rise. Even in youth, he chose unity over kinship, power over peace. The world was watching. Word spread that Temujin, barely a teenager, had murdered a brother to lead. The Tayachiud, the clan that had abandoned his family, saw this with suspicion and fear. They rode to his camp with warriors. Temujin resisted, but they overpowered him. He was taken in chains, locked in a wooden collar, a public symbol of humiliation. He couldn't lie down, couldn't sleep, could barely breathe. A boy turned into a trophy. But Temujin watched. He listened to the clan leaders, learned how they fought, how they argued. He memorized the layout of their camp. He even made a friend, a guard's son. Temujin, even as a prisoner, inspired others. His eyes burned with calm fire. He asked questions. He told jokes. And then, one night, the friend unlocked his collar. Temujin fled into the darkness, barefoot and bloodied. He hid in a river under a log for hours, breathing through a reed. When the Tayachiud gave up the search, Temujin returned home, not in shame, but in glory. He had escaped death, and once again, survived. Temujin was now 16. He rode to the Angirit tribe, where Borte, the girl promised to him years earlier, still waited. They married immediately. She was not just his wife, she was his equal, his closest advisor, his anchor in a storm of ambition. Together, they returned to Hoylun. Together, they began to rebuild. But fate was not finished. Only months after their marriage, the Merkits, enemies of Yesuge, raided their camp. They kidnapped Borte, took her into the forest, disappeared. Temujin was shattered, but not broken. He would bring her back, and he would raise hell to do it. Temujin could not rescue Borte alone, so he went to the one man who owed his father a debt. Togrul, now known as Wang Khan, leader of the Karait tribe. Temujin kneeled before him, reminded him of the bond he once held with Yesuge, blood brothers, sworn loyalty. Wang Khan agreed. Temujin also called upon his blood brother, his childhood friend, Jamuka. Together, the three leaders, Temujin, Wang Khan, and Jamuka, rode with 20,000 warriors to the Merkit stronghold. They struck at dawn. The Merkits were caught off guard. Their camp was burned. Many were killed. And Borta was rescued. She was safe, but forever changed. Months later, Borta gave birth to a son, Jochi. But there was a shadow. Borta had been held by the Merkits for many weeks. Was Jochi Temujin's son, or another's? Temujin chose silence. He raised Jochi as his own, treated him no different than his later sons, but the doubt would haunt the family forever, especially after Temujin's death. Temujin's world was growing. He was no longer a boy struggling to survive. He was a man surrounded by warriors, wives, and weapons. But old wounds remained. The Tayachiud, the tribe that enslaved him, still ruled. Temujin began raiding them in small bands, at first just cattle, then warriors, then blood. He was no longer surviving the steppe, he was conquering it, one tribe at a time. They tried to starve him, they tried to break him, they tried to chain him. But the boy who was orphaned, hunted, enslaved, had become a man, with a sword in his hand and a fury in his heart. And soon, the Mongol steppe would kneel. Two boys once rode together under the wide Mongolian sky. One, the son of a fallen chief, Temujin. The other, the son of a great noble, Yamuka. They hunted together, fought side by side, swore oath sealed by blood and fire. They were Anda, a sacred bond deeper than brothers. In a world torn apart by clans and chaos, they promised unity. But unity is a fragile thing. By the time Temujin had recovered Borta and avenged his family's suffering, he had begun to gather followers, not just warriors, but believers, men who saw in him something new, a leader who rose by merit, not birth, who gave power to the strong and loyal, not just to the nobly born, who punished betrayal ruthlessly, but rewarded loyalty generously. This was revolutionary. The Mongol world was built on bloodlines and rank, but Temujin was building something different. Yamuka, too, was growing in power. He was charismatic, clever, well-connected, especially among the elite. But Yamuka still believed in the traditional ways, the rule of the noble class, the tribal council, the bloodline right. Where Temujin welcomed peasants, slaves, even outcasts into his ranks, Yamuka saw it as an insult. To Yamuka, Temujin was not a brother anymore. He was a threat to the old order. In 1186, Temujin took a bold step. He declared himself Khan, a ruler, not of a tribe, but of all who followed him. He did not wait for the council. He did not ask permission. He acted. This was a shock. For centuries, only the nobles chose the Khan. Temujin had broken tradition. Yamuka was furious. He called Temujin a usurper, an upstart, a dangerous man, and then he raised an army. The Mongol steppe was now divided. Temujin, the reformer; Yamuka, the traditionalist. Temujin's followers were shepherds, blacksmiths, warriors, and merchants. Yamuka's were aristocrats, horse lords, and elders. It was not just a battle of armies. It was a battle of visions. In 1187, the two sides met at the Battle of Dalan Baljut. Temujin's army was smaller, but fast, mobile, and highly disciplined. They used light cavalry, rapid maneuvers, coordinated tactics. Unlike traditional tribal war, Temujin fought with precision. But Yamuka had the numbers. He encircled Temujin's forces, and he won. Temujin was forced to retreat. Many of his men were captured. What came next shocked even the steppe. Yamuka ordered that 70 young officers from Temujin's army be executed, not by blade, but by boiling alive. One by one, they were thrown into iron pots. Their screams filled the valley. Their blood ran into the rivers. It was not just punishment, it was a message. This is what happens to traitors. Temujin never forgot. For years, Temujin vanished from the spotlight. He regrouped. He rebuilt his alliances. He watched his enemies. He learned the names of every man who betrayed him. He mapped the tribes, studied their leaders, found their weaknesses. And as Yamuka grew comfortable, Temujin grew stronger. By 1190, he had reassembled a growing force. And this time, he would not make the same mistake. Temujin began shaping his followers into something never seen before in Mongol history. An army with structure, a nation of laws, a people with purpose. He reorganized his troops into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000. These were not family-based. They were based on loyalty and skill. A slave could command nobles. A poor man could rise through courage. This was unheard of. This was revolution. Meanwhile, Yamuka was losing support. His alliance of nobles bickered. Old traditions clashed with new realities, and whispers spread. Maybe Temujin was right. The Mongol people didn't want a ruler who ruled by birthright anymore. They wanted one who ruled by justice. By 1196, even Wang Khan, once Yamuka's ally, sided with Temujin. And the tables began to turn. By the year 1201, Yamuka tried again. He gathered the remaining tribes still loyal to the old ways. He declared himself Gur Khan, universal ruler. It was a challenge, a direct insult. Temujin answered. At the Battle of the 13 Sides, Temujin crushed Jamuka's forces. His cavalry flanked and shattered their lines. His archers cut through nobles like silk. Jamuka fled. But not for long. In 1203, Temujin captured Jamuka. His generals wanted him executed, but Temujin hesitated. This was his Unda, his sworn brother, the boy he had once played with in the grasslands, the boy who had helped him rescue Borte. Temujin offered peace, a second chance, but Jamuka refused. He said, "There cannot be two suns in the sky. Kill me cleanly and rule without shame." And Temujin did, with honor. Jamuka was given a noble death, beheaded swiftly, no torture, no boiling, just silence. The brotherhood was broken, but not forgotten. Sometimes enemies are born from love. Sometimes your greatest rival is the one who once held your hand. Jamuka and Temujin dreamed of uniting the Mongol people, but only one could wear the crown. The old world had died in fire, and from its ashes, a new Khan was rising. Temujin was no longer the orphaned boy struggling for survival. He had returned from the shadows, stronger, wiser, more ruthless. But to claim the title he sought, he had to prove himself again, not just as a survivor, but as a leader, not just as a fighter, but as a general. The Mongol steppe was harsh. Power belonged to those who could command fear and respect. Temujin understood this better than most. Among the nomads, the rules of war were brutal. Honor was simple: loyalty to your clan, strength in battle, death to traitors. But Temujin wanted more than this old code. He wanted an army bound by discipline, by loyalty, not just by blood. He believed the greatest warriors were those who fought for their leader, not just their family. This was a dangerous idea. Temujin drilled his warriors every day, from dawn till dusk. He taught them to ride faster, shoot straighter, move silently. Every soldier learned to fight on foot and horseback, to wield bow, spear, and sword with deadly precision. But more than that, Temujin taught them loyalty. He rewarded bravery with promotions. He punished betrayal with death. His soldiers called him Khan, leader, but also father and judge. Temujin's army was a family, but unlike any before it. He mixed nobles and commoners, slaves and hunters. Each man was judged by his courage and skill, not his birth. This was revolutionary, and it created fierce loyalty. Men would die for Temujin because he gave them purpose, because he gave them honor. Temujin's rise was not without bloodshed. His first campaigns were raids against rival clans. He attacked swiftly, horses pounding like thunder, arrows darkening the sky. One of his earliest victories was against the Merkits, a clan who had kidnapped Borte years before. Temujin's fury was legendary. He showed no mercy. In battle, he used feints and ambushes. He was unpredictable. His enemies called him the Wolf, a predator no one could escape. Temujin was not only a warrior, but a strategist. He studied the lands, the tribes, the enemy's weaknesses. He formed alliances, sometimes through marriage, sometimes through fear, but always through power. He dreamed of something larger, a united Mongol nation, a force no one could stop. Temujin's personal standard was the wolf banner, a symbol of the eternal steppe and its fierce spirit. Under this banner, his men fought as one. They shared victories and losses. They were bound by blood and honor. And as the wolf banner rose, more tribes joined Temujin. Some came out of fear, others out of respect. Unlike many steppe warriors who fought for personal glory, Temujin demanded strict discipline. He forbade looting among his own people. He punished any who harmed civilians or broke laws. His system of orders and punishments was unlike anything the steppe had seen. This discipline made his army stronger, more reliable. His soldiers fought not just for plunder, but for a future. Year by year, Temujin's army grew. The tribes of the Mongol plateau started to pay tribute. Some submitted peacefully. Others were crushed under his relentless campaigns. But one thing was clear. Temujin was no longer just a clan leader. He was a kingmaker, a general whose name was whispered in fear and awe. Temujin faced betrayals, defections, and assassinations. He learned harsh lessons. Loyalty was never guaranteed. He showed both mercy and terror to those who crossed him. One story tells of a rival chief who betrayed Temujin at a feast. Temujin's response was swift and brutal. The traitor's head was thrown into the fire as a warning. Such stories made him feared, but also respected. Through all this, Borte remained by his side. She was more than a wife. She was an advisor, a source of strength. Temujin often consulted her on matters of clan politics and strategy. Their partnership was one of mutual respect and love, a rare beacon in a brutal world. As Temujin's power grew, so did the stakes. Rival tribes formed coalitions against him. Old allies doubted him, but he crushed every opposition. In the years ahead, he would face his greatest challenge yet, uniting the fractious Mongol clans under a single banner. Temujin was no longer a boy, no longer just a survivor. He had become a general, a leader who could command thousands. But the steppe is never still, and the path to power is paved in blood. The true test of a Khan is how he conquers not just enemies, but his own people. By the late 1190s, Temujin's power had grown into a force the Mongol steppe had never seen. But not everyone welcomed his rise. Yemuka, once his blood brother, now his fiercest rival, had gathered his own coalition of loyal nobles and warriors. The old ways and the old bloodlines would not die quietly. The steppe was preparing for war. In 1196, Temujin and Yemuka faced off near the valley of Dalan Baljut. Thousands of riders assembled, horses pawing the earth, warriors tightening their grips on reins and weapons. The air was thick with tension, dust, and the scent of sweat and leather. Yemuka's forces outnumbered Temujin's, swelling with aristocratic clans determined to crush this upstart leader. Temujin's men were fewer, but fiercely loyal and disciplined. This was more than a battle. It was a fight for the future of the Mongol people. The two armies charged. Temujin's warriors struck fast, using the steppe's open space to their advantage. Arrows darkened the sky like a swarm of locusts. Horses thundered. Screams pierced the chaos. But Yemuka's numbers overwhelmed them. Temujin's forces were surrounded. They fought desperately, but defeat was inevitable. After the battle, Yemuka made a gruesome example. He ordered 70 captured officers from Temujin's army to be boiled alive. The horrific executions were not only punishment, but a message. This is the fate of traitors. The screams echoed across the valley, chilling the hearts of those who heard. Temujin's men mourned, but their loyalty did not waver. If anything, the cruelty steeled their resolve. Temujin retreated into the wilderness. He was broken, but not beaten. He spent years rebuilding alliances, gathering new warriors, and refining his strategies. He understood that brute force alone could not win this war. He needed loyalty, order, and vision. Temujin reorganized his forces into a revolutionary military structure. Units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, called Arban, Yahun, Mingan, and Tumen. Every soldier knew his commander. Every commander knew his men. Meritocracy replaced noble birth. If you were brave and loyal, you could rise. If you betrayed, you died. This system made Temujin's army disciplined, swift, and ruthless. Jamuka's rigid adherence to aristocratic tradition began to alienate many. Some tribes switched sides. Even the powerful Wang Khan, Temujin's old ally, wavered. By 1201, Temujin was ready to strike. His forces clashed with Jamuka's again in a decisive battle. This time, Temujin's tactics and discipline shattered Jamuka's army. Jamuka fled, but was captured in 1203. Temujin's commanders demanded execution by brutal methods. But Temujin remembered their childhood oath. He offered Jamuka a noble death, swift and clean. Jamuka refused to bow. Temujin executed him honorably, ending their bitter rivalry. With Jamuka's death, no rival stood. In 1206, Temujin was declared Genghis Khan, universal ruler, by a council of Mongol chiefs. The wolf had risen. The Mongol tribes were united, ready to sweep across Asia and change history forever. Brotherhood broken by ambition, traditions shattered by revolution, a brutal war that forged a nation. Genghis Khan was no longer just a man. He was the voice of the steppe, the wrath of the wolf, and the beginning of an empire without equal. In 1206, after decades of bloodshed and endless battles, a historic event took place under the vast Mongolian sky. Leaders from every Mongol tribe gathered at a great Kurultai, a council of war and peace. The time had come for a new order. Temujin, the orphan boy who had survived every betrayal, now stood before hundreds of chieftains. He was no longer just a clan leader. He was to become Genghis Khan, the Great Khan, the universal ruler of the Mongols. The ceremony was unlike anything before seen on the steppe. A sacred ritual sealed the unification of the tribes. Temujin was crowned under the eternal blue sky, the sky god Tengri witnessing the birth of a new empire. He was given a new name, Genghis Khan, the Oceanic or Universal Khan. It was a title signifying boundless power and destiny. But Genghis Khan did not rule like the old Khans. He created the Yasa, a secret code of laws to unite his people. The Yasa forbade theft, betrayal, and desertion. It demanded absolute loyalty and courage. But it also protected the weak, ensured religious freedom, and regulated trade. Genghis Khan's law was strict, but it was fair, binding the Mongol nation with order instead of chaos. The tribes of Mongolia had long been divided by blood feuds, rivalries, and petty wars. Genghis Khan ended all that. He appointed loyal generals from all clans, nobles and commoners alike. He shared power carefully, and he crushed any rebellion without mercy. Under his leadership, the Mongols began to see themselves not as tribes, but as one people. One of Genghis Khan's greatest innovations was promoting men based on merit, not birth. Many of his top commanders came from humble origins, former slaves, hunters, and even captured enemies. They earned their positions through loyalty and skill. This broke centuries of tradition and helped build a highly efficient army and administration. Women also played an essential role. Genghis Khan respected the advice of his mother, Hoelun, and his wife, Borte. Mongol women managed the home, herds, and even commanded troops during battles. This balance of power gave the Mongol nation stability from within. The Mongols were nomads. Their strength lay in their mobility. Genghis Khan perfected the use of the horse cavalry, dividing his army into units that could move swiftly across thousands of miles. Each warrior was also a scout, messenger, and hunter, a master of survival. Genghis Khan was not just a warrior, he was a shrewd diplomat. He sent envoys to neighboring tribes and kingdoms, offering peace in exchange for submission and tribute. He promised protection, but warned of merciless retaliation for those who refused. His reputation spread like wildfire, a man who rewarded loyalty and crushed rebellion. With the Mongol tribes united, Genghis Khan's gaze turned beyond the steppe. The wealth of China, the Silk Road's riches, and the fertile lands of Central Asia beckoned. His army was ready, his people were united, and his destiny was clear. From the ashes of betrayal and war, from the broken clans of the steppe, a nation was born. One people, one law, one Khan, and the world would never be the same. By 1206, Genghis Khan had unified the Mongol tribes into a single disciplined nation. His armies, forged from the fires of betrayal, hardship, and vision, now turned their eyes outward. Beyond the endless steppe lay great kingdoms, rich, complex, and vulnerable. The first target, the Jin dynasty of northern China. The Jin ruled a vast, wealthy empire. Their cities gleamed with gold and silk. Their armies boasted thousands of well-trained soldiers. Yet beneath the surface, the Jin court was riddled with corruption, internal struggles, and complacency. Genghis Khan sensed opportunity. For the Mongols, it was more than conquest. It was destiny. The Jin controlled much of the northern Silk Road, the lifeblood of trade connecting China to Central Asia and beyond. For centuries, this trade route had enriched merchants and emperors alike. But for Genghis Khan, it was also a chokehold. The Jin levied heavy taxes on caravans passing through their territory, draining wealth from the tribes and merchants who depended on free trade. Mongol caravans were often attacked, taxed, or robbed. For a leader who dreamed of empire and prosperity, this was intolerable. The spark that ignited war came when the Jin emperor demanded that Genghis Khan submit as a vassal. He sent envoys, demanding tribute and loyalty. Genghis Khan, the son of an orphan, the master of the steppe, refused. He sent back a simple message. "I am the wolf of the steppe. I bow to no man." The Jin court responded with arrogance, sending armies to punish the Mongols. Genghis Khan mobilized his forces with ruthless efficiency. His army, organized into units of tens, hundreds, thousands, and 10,000s, was a marvel of coordination. Each warrior carried multiple bows, quivers filled with arrows, swords, and lances. They traveled light and fast, capable of crossing hundreds of miles a day. But the real strength was their tactical genius. Feigned retreats to lure enemies into traps, rapid flanking maneuvers, use of psychological warfare, spreading fear before battle, excellent communication through horse messengers. The first major target was Zhengdu, the Jin capital, modern-day Beijing. A sprawling city protected by massive walls and thousands of soldiers, the Jin army underestimated the Mongols. The siege began with a brutal assault. Mongol archers rained arrows, disrupting the city's defenses. Engineers brought early siege weapons, catapults and battering rams adapted from Chinese designs. The city resisted fiercely. Inside, the streets filled with panic. The Jin nobles feasted while commoners starved. Though known as masters of cavalry, the Mongols adapted quickly to siege warfare, a skill they had little tradition in. Genghis Khan recruited expert engineers and specialists from conquered peoples, Chinese, Persians, and others. They built siege towers, used flaming arrows, and even diverted rivers to flood city defenses. This blend of brutal cavalry raids and sophisticated siege tactics shocked the Jin. Genghis Khan also used spies and propaganda. Inside Zhongdu, secret Mongol sympathizers worked to weaken the city's resistance. Some officials opened gates for the Mongols during nighttime raids. Others spread rumors to sow distrust among Jin commanders. Internal betrayal hastened the city's fall. After months, Zhongdu fell. The Mongols entered a city ravaged by war and famine. They spared few enemies and looted extensively. But they also took many skilled craftsmen and administrators into their empire. The fall of Zhongdu sent shockwaves across Asia. No one had expected the nomads of the steppe to capture a capital city. Next, Genghis Khan turned southwest to the Shisha kingdom, another powerful state controlling key trade routes. Shisha was rich but weakly defended. Genghis Khan demanded submission. When the ruler refused, the Mongols launched a series of devastating raids. Their cavalry tore through Shisha's armies, razed cities, and forced the kingdom into vassalage. Genghis Khan's reputation for cruelty was well earned. Cities that resisted were often destroyed, their populations slaughtered or enslaved. But those who surrendered peacefully were spared, allowed to keep their lands and customs, as long as they paid tribute and provided troops. This blend of terror and tolerance created a powerful but manageable empire. One of the defining moments was the Battle of Yehuling in 1211. The Jin army, desperate to halt the Mongol advance, assembled a force of over 100,000 soldiers. But Genghis Khan's tactics were superior. He split his forces, used feigned retreats, and struck the Jin flanks with lightning speed. The Jin were routed. This victory opened the path deeper into China. Mongol victories were not just military, they were psychological. Genghis Khan understood the power of fear. He spread stories of Mongol cruelty, exaggerating and using them to convince enemies to surrender without a fight. The phrase Mongol terror became legendary. This tactic saved countless Mongol lives and sped their conquests. As Genghis Khan expanded, he realized the importance of trade. He protected merchants, reduced taxes, and encouraged cultural exchange. The Mongol Empire became a protector of the Silk Road, ensuring the flow of goods, ideas, and wealth between East and West. By the time Genghis Khan paused his campaign in northern China, he had transformed from a steppe warlord into an empire builder. His conquests reshaped Asia's political landscape. They set the stage for the Mongol Empire's expansion across continents. But the campaign was far from over. The first conquests were brutal, strategic, and visionary. Genghis Khan was no longer just the wolf of the steppe. He was a storm sweeping across Asia, leaving kingdoms in ruins and an empire in rise. The world had entered a new age, and it would never be the same again. After the crushing victories against the Jin dynasty and the submission of the Shisha kingdom, Genghis Khan's ambitions burned fiercer than ever. The vast lands of Central Asia beckoned, fertile plains, wealthy cities, and trade routes that linked east and west. But these lands were ruled by powerful kingdoms: the Khwarezmian Empire, a Persianate Muslim dynasty boasting wealth, armies, and pride. It was a realm rich in culture and commerce, but fractured by internal rivalries and blind to the gathering storm on their borders. Initially, Genghis Khan sought peaceful relations. He sent envoys to the Khwarezmian Shah, proposing trade, friendship, and safe passage for merchants. The Mongols wanted open borders for their caravans, promising wealth and cooperation in return. But the Shah of Khwarezm saw the Mongols as uncivilized barbarians. He ordered the execution of one envoy and the imprisonment of others, an insult and a declaration of war. This act of defiance enraged Genghis Khan beyond measure. For Mongols, the killing of envoys was the gravest offense, a sacred law broken. Genghis Khan gathered his generals and warriors. He declared war, not just for revenge, but for the total destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire. The Mongol army, now a well-oiled machine, began a vast march west across deserts, mountains, and rivers. They moved faster and more efficiently than any army before them, using intelligence, speed, and ruthless tactics to strike at the heart of the Khwarezmian domains. The Mongols split into several columns to attack multiple targets simultaneously, confusing and overwhelming the enemy. The first major battle was at Otrar, a key fortress and trading city. The siege was brutal. The Mongols surrounded the city, cutting off supplies and bombarding the walls with siege weapons. Inside, the defenders resisted fiercely, but Mongol discipline and strategy wore them down. After weeks, Otrar fell. The Mongols showed little mercy, as a warning to others. As the Mongol horde advanced, they employed fear as a weapon. Cities that resisted were razed, their populations massacred or enslaved. Tales of Mongol cruelty spread like wildfire, but those who surrendered early were often spared. They could keep their lands, traditions, and lives, as long as they pledged loyalty. This tactic saved resources and manpower while expanding the empire swiftly. The great cities of Bukhara and Samarkand, jewels of the Silk Road and centers of Islamic culture, soon faced the Mongol onslaught. Bukhara, a city of scholars and merchants, resisted but was overwhelmed. Its libraries and mosques were destroyed. The city was plundered and thousands were killed. Samarkand tried to fortify, but soon fell after fierce battles. The Khwarezmian Shah fled westward, abandoning his empire. His army fractured and scattered. Mongol generals pursued relentlessly. In a series of swift battles, the Shah's forces were annihilated. By 1221, the Khwarezmian Empire was effectively destroyed. The Mongols excelled at gathering intelligence. They used spies, scouts, and local informants to know enemy strengths, weaknesses, and terrain. Their communication system of horse messengers ensured rapid coordination. This intelligence network was key to their unstoppable advance. Though brutal in war, the Mongols were pragmatic rulers. Genghis Khan allowed religious freedom and often incorporated local administrators into his system. He respected the cultures and traditions of conquered peoples, as long as they obeyed Mongol rule. The Mongol invasions brought devastation to millions. Cities lay in ruins, populations decimated. Yet they also opened trade routes, facilitated cultural exchanges, and reshaped the political map of Asia. Genghis Khan's empire connected east and west in ways that lasted centuries. With Central Asia and Persia under control, Genghis Khan's empire was poised to expand further. New horizons beckoned, the rich lands of Russia, the Islamic world, and beyond. The Mongol horde was truly unstoppable. From diplomacy to devastation, from deserts to great cities, the Mongol horde swept across Central Asia like a force of nature. Genghis Khan was no mere conqueror. He was a visionary, a leader who shaped the fate of continents. And his empire was only just beginning. Genghis Khan was not merely a conqueror of lands and peoples. He was a visionary who understood that an empire must be held together by more than fear and force. To create a lasting realm, he forged a system of laws, cultural respect, and governance that would unite diverse peoples under one banner. At the heart of Genghis Khan's legacy was the Yasa, a secret and sacred legal code, whispered about but never fully written down. The Yasa covered everything: laws against theft and corruption, rules of military discipline, religious tolerance, protection of the poor and the environment, punishments for betrayal and disobedience. It was strict, but fair. Its secrecy and mystery kept it powerful and respected. Before the Yasa, Mongol society was fragmented. Clans ruled by bloodlines, feuds lasted generations, and justice was often personal and brutal. Genghis Khan imposed a system where laws applied to all, even the nobles and commanders. This was revolutionary. It created stability and trust in a realm built from fierce independence. Unlike many conquerors, Genghis Khan practiced religious tolerance. His empire spanned Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, shamanists, and more. He allowed each to worship freely, understanding that faith was deeply personal and powerful. He often consulted religious leaders for advice and respected their customs. This openness helped maintain peace among diverse peoples. To govern his vast empire, Genghis Khan established an efficient bureaucracy. He appointed trusted officials, many from conquered peoples, to manage provinces. Merit and loyalty mattered more than ethnicity or birth. A vast network of horse messengers, the Yam system, connected the empire, enabling rapid communication across thousands of miles. Under Genghis Khan, the Silk Road flourished. He protected merchants and trade caravans, lowered tariffs, and encouraged cultural exchanges. This created unprecedented wealth and connectivity between East and West. Ideas, technology, and goods flowed freely, from Chinese inventions like gunpowder to Persian science and European art. Mongol women held significant power and influence. They managed households, herds, and even political affairs when men were at war. Genghis Khan respected strong women in his family and court. His daughters and granddaughters were often married into ruling families, spreading Mongol influence diplomatically. Genghis Khan introduced laws protecting property rights, regulated taxes, and established fair trade practices. He punished banditry harshly, ensuring safety for travelers and merchants. This legal order encouraged settlement and prosperity in once chaotic regions. The Mongol Empire became a melting pot of cultures. Artists, scholars, and craftsmen from diverse backgrounds mingled and exchanged ideas. Cities like Karakoram, the empire's capital, became vibrant centers of culture and learning. Though Genghis Khan died in 1227, his laws and governance shaped the Mongol Empire for centuries. His sons and grandsons expanded the realm, but the foundation of law, tolerance, and meritocracy endured. The Yasa influenced later legal systems in Asia and beyond. Genghis Khan's true legacy was not just the land he conquered, but the order he created from chaos. An empire bound by law, united by culture, and sustained by vision. In the end, he was not just a warrior, but a builder of worlds. By 1227, Genghis Khan was a man who had conquered more lands than any before him. His empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the edges of Persia. But even the strongest warrior must face his mortal fate. In his final year, Genghis Khan led a massive campaign against the Western Xia kingdom, a stubborn enemy who had repeatedly defied Mongol rule. The campaign was brutal and relentless, testing the limits of even the great Khan's health. Genghis Khan was no longer the vigorous young warrior of his youth. Decades of war, wounds, and hardship had taken their toll. Some say he was injured in battle. Others whisper of an illness or a fall from his horse. The exact cause of his death remains a mystery, lost in the shrouds of legend and secrecy. What is certain is that in the summer of 1227, Genghis Khan died. The Mongols kept his death a secret for many months. A vast conspiracy shrouded the Khan's passing. His burial place remains unknown to this day, hidden by the most elaborate secrecy. Legends tell of an unmarked grave guarded by thousands of warriors, and that all who witnessed his burial were killed to protect the secret. This mystery adds to the myth of Genghis Khan, an eternal figure whose spirit still roams the steppe. With Genghis Khan's death, a delicate question arose. Who would inherit the vast Mongol Empire? Unlike many empires, where power was seized by force, Genghis had a plan. He divided his empire among his 4 legitimate sons. Jochi, his eldest, a brilliant warrior, but whose legitimacy was questioned. Chagatai, a strict and loyal son. Ogadai, his 3rd son and chosen successor. Tolui, the youngest, fierce and loyal to his father. Jochi's paternity had been questioned since birth. Rumors swirled that he was not Genghis Khan's biological son. This caused tensions among the brothers, especially with Chagatai, who openly challenged Jochi's claim. Despite his military prowess, Jochi was passed over for the title of Great Khan. Ogadai, known for his calm and diplomatic nature, was chosen as the Great Khan in a grand Kurultai, a council of Mongol nobles who elected him to succeed his father. He was seen as a unifier, someone who could continue Genghis Khan's legacy with wisdom and strength. Ogadai's reign would prove crucial to the empire's expansion.
The Kurultai that elected Ogadai was not without drama. Allies and rivals jockeyed for power. Key generals, including Genghis Khan's trusted companions, influenced the decision. The delicate balance between the brothers shaped the future of the empire. Tolui, the youngest son, inherited the Mongol homeland and the empire's heartland. Though he did not become Great Khan, Tolui was a fierce warrior and loyal steward of his father's legacy. His descendants, including Kublai Khan, would play vital roles in the empire's history. Jochi's descendants were granted vast lands in the western part of the empire, the Golden Horde. Despite Jochi's contested legitimacy, his line became powerful rulers, controlling parts of Russia and Eastern Europe. The Mongol people mourned deeply. Genghis Khan was more than a leader. He was a symbol of strength, unity, and destiny. Songs, stories, and legends about him spread across the empire. His life became the foundation of Mongol identity. Though Genghis Khan was gone, his vision endured. Under Ogadai and later successors, the Mongol Empire expanded to unprecedented sizes. From Europe to China, his descendants ruled vast territories. Genghis Khan's death did not diminish his legend. He became a godlike figure in Mongol culture, a symbol of power and destiny. His name was invoked in battles, his laws upheld as sacred. The mystery surrounding his death only enhanced his mythical status. The succession established patterns of governance and conflict. While the empire flourished, rivalries among Genghis Khan's descendants sometimes sparked civil wars. Yet the system he created allowed the empire to survive through generations. The Great Khan who conquered the world had passed into legend, but his blood, his laws, and his spirit lived on. In the vast empire he forged, in the stories told by firelight, and in the hearts of a people united by destiny. Genghis Khan's death marked the end of an era, but the beginning of a saga that would shape history forever. After the death of Genghis Khan in 1227, the Mongol Empire faced a critical moment. The Great Khan's vision was vast, but unity was fragile. In 1229, the Mongol nobles convened a great Kurultai, a council to elect the new Great Khan. Ogadai, Genghis Khan's third son, was chosen. Calm, pragmatic, and wise, Ogadai was a leader who balanced respect for tradition with a forward-looking vision. Ogadai understood that maintaining such a vast empire required strong governance. He reinforced the administrative systems his father had created, appointing trusted generals and officials to govern conquered territories. He expanded the YAM system, a vast network of relay stations and messengers that connected the empire, ensuring rapid communication across thousands of miles. This infrastructure was vital for coordinating military campaigns and managing trade. Under Ogadai's rule, the Mongol army grew even more formidable. New tactics, weapons, and strategies were developed. Siege technology improved with the help of Chinese and Persian engineers. Cavalry units were further specialized, with horse archers, heavy cavalry, and scouts working in perfect harmony. Ogadai personally oversaw military campaigns and rewarded merit, regardless of social status. One of Ogadai's most famous military campaigns was the invasion of Eastern Europe. In 1236, the Mongol armies launched a massive westward push, They crushed the forces of the Volga Bulgars, Kipchaks, and later decisively defeated the combined armies of Poland, Hungary, and the Holy Roman Empire. Cities like Kiev and Budapest fell under the Mongol onslaught. The European nobility had never faced such a mobile and ruthless enemy. The fall of Kiev in 1240 was a turning point. Kiev, once a great center of trade and culture, was sacked and burned. The Mongols killed much of the population, but also installed loyal rulers to control the region. This conquest established Mongol dominance over much of Russia for centuries. While the Western campaign raged, Ögedei also pressed advances into the Middle East and China. The Mongols besieged the Jin dynasty capital again and moved deeper into Song China. His reign was marked by a push to fully subjugate China, a task unfinished by Genghis Khan. Ögedei was not only a warrior, but a diplomat. He maintained and expanded alliances with neighboring powers, including some European kingdoms and the Islamic world. He sent envoys across continents, establishing trade relations and sometimes intimidating rivals with offers of alliance or threats of war. Ögedei expanded the capital city of Karakorum, transforming it into a political and cultural hub. It became a symbol of Mongol unity, with palaces, temples, markets, and diverse peoples living together. Artists, merchants, and scholars from across the empire gathered there. Despite successes, Ögedei faced internal challenges. Some conquered peoples resisted Mongol rule. There were occasional rebellions and power struggles among Mongol nobles. Ögedei dealt with these firmly, balancing diplomacy and force to maintain control. Ögedei died in 1241, suddenly and unexpectedly. His death caused a political crisis. The Mongol advance into Europe paused as nobles returned to Mongolia for a new Kurultai. This temporary halt saved many European cities from destruction. Under Ögedei, the Mongol Empire reached new heights. Territories expanded deeper into Europe, China, and the Middle East. His policies strengthened the empire's infrastructure, law, and governance. Ögedei maintained the empire's reputation for ruthless conquest, but also practiced tolerance. He upheld religious freedom and protected merchants. This blend of fear and pragmatism kept the empire stable and prosperous. Ögedei's reign laid the groundwork for future Mongol rulers. His administrative reforms, military innovations, and cultural policies shaped the empire for decades. His successors would continue expanding and eventually establish the Yuan dynasty in China. Ögedei Khan was the son who took the torch from his legendary father and carried it into new lands. His reign was a time of conquest, governance, and empire building. Though sometimes overshadowed by Genghis Khan's towering legacy, Ögedei's impact was profound. He transformed a united tribe into a lasting empire. The empire marched forward under Ögedei's steady hand. His vision expanded horizons, his armies reshaped continents, and his rule laid the foundation for a world forever changed by the Mongols. The Khan's legacy lived on in steel, law, and the beating heart of a united empire. While Ögedei expanded the empire from the east, another branch of the Mongol family tree was growing powerful in the west. The Golden Horde, ruled by the descendants of Jochi, Genghis Khan's eldest son, would dominate the western steppes, parts of Russia, and Eastern Europe for over 2 centuries. Its founder was Batu Khan, Jochi's son, and a fierce commander with the blood of empire in his veins. He wasn't just building a khanate, he was carving a kingdom from the bones of Europe. In 1236, Batu Khan began his westward invasion with the legendary general Subutai by his side. Together,
They unleashed the full fury of the Mongol war machine. In 1237, Ryazan fell. By 1240, Kiev, the heart of Kievan Rus, was reduced to ash. In 1241, Poland and Hungary burned as Mongol cavalry swept through Europe with terrifying speed. The Mongols used their classic tactics: feigned retreats, encirclement, and total destruction. Western armies, heavy and slow, stood no chance. At Legnica, 1241, Polish and German knights were outmaneuvered and slaughtered. Days later, at Mohi in Hungary, Mongols flanked and annihilated the Hungarian army. These battles sent shockwaves across Christendom. For the first time, Europe knew fear by a new name: Mongol. The Mongols had reached the gates of Vienna. All of Europe trembled. Then, they suddenly turned back. Why? In 1241, news arrived that Genghis Khan had died. All Mongol princes were required to return for the Kurultai to elect the next great Khan. So Batu Khan withdrew. It wasn't mercy. It was Mongol law. Europe was saved, not by swords or saints, but by a death in Mongolia. After the withdrawal, Batu Khan established the Golden Horde in the western steppes. Its capital, Sarai, became one of the richest cities in the medieval world. From here, Batu ruled over modern-day Russia, parts of Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and the Caucasus, subjugated states like Novgorod and Moscow. Rather than rule directly, Batu imposed tribute. Russian princes bent the knee, paid taxes, and served their Mongol overlords. This era, often called the Mongol yoke, lasted nearly 250 years. While brutal at times, Mongol rule also stabilized borders, reopened trade routes, introduced centralized administration, spread innovations in taxation and communication. Moscow, once a minor town, grew under Mongol favor, later becoming the heart of Russian resistance.
Though the Mongols were initially shamanists, many within the Golden Horde converted to Islam by the late 1200s. Yet religious tolerance remained. Christian churches operated freely. Orthodox leaders were often spared and respected. The Mongols taxed religions, but rarely persecuted them. This tolerance allowed a fragile balance between cultures. The Golden Horde was a cultural bridge. Through the Silk Road and overland routes, goods moved between China, Persia, and Europe. Spices, textiles, knowledge, medicine, mathematics. Mongol rule enabled the rise of cities like Crimea's Kaffa, where Genoese merchants traded freely. Even Marco Polo would travel safely through Mongol lands thanks to the protections they offered. In the West, the Mongols were viewed with awe and terror. Pope Innocent IV sent missionaries to learn about them and perhaps convert them. Some Christian rulers even dreamed of a Mongol-Christian alliance against Islam. But the Mongols had their own plans. They were not looking for allies. They were looking for obedience. After Batu Khan's death, the Golden Horde remained powerful, but cracks began to appear. Rivalries between Khans, conversion to Islam, and challenges from emerging Russian powers weakened the horde over time. By the 1300s, Tamerlane would strike heavy blows, and by the 1400s, the Grand Duchy of Moscow would rise. But in their prime, the Golden Horde were rulers of the largest and most feared empire Europe had ever known. The Mongol impact on Europe was massive. Warfare evolved, castles changed, cavalry tactics improved, trade opened. The Black Death, carried by Mongol-linked trade routes, reshaped Europe. Russia's centralized power model can be traced to Mongol governance. Even the idea of Tsar comes from the Mongol-influenced imperial identity. The Mongols didn't just pass through Europe. They rewired it. They reshaped its economies, scarred its cities, and transformed its politics. The Golden Horde was not a forgotten offshoot. It was the Western fist of the Great Khan, a force that conquered, ruled, and left behind echoes that still shape the continent today. In the West, Genghis Khan's legacy rode on, in thundering hooves across snow-covered plains, in tribute-laden wagons rolling towards Sarai, in the silent terror that swept across Europe. The Golden Horde was not just an empire, it was a shadow cast over Europe by a man long dead, but never forgotten. By the mid-1200s, the Mongol Empire had stretched from Korea to Eastern Europe, but there was one region it had not fully conquered: China. The Jin dynasty had fallen, the Xia had vanished, but the powerful Southern Song dynasty, with its rich cities, navy, and bureaucracy, still held strong. And it was Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan and son of Tolui, who would take on the challenge. Born in 1215, Kublai Khan was unlike any Mongol before him. Educated in Chinese history, Confucian philosophy, and military strategy, he surrounded himself with Chinese advisors, Buddhist monks, Persian scholars, and Muslim astronomers. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a politician, a thinker, a builder of empires. His vision, not merely to conquer China, but to rule it like a Chinese emperor. After the death of Monki Khan in 1259, Kublai's older brother and then Great Khan, a civil war broke out. Kublai faced off against his own brother, Arak Bok, in a brutal contest for the throne. It wasn't just a struggle for power, it was a battle of ideologies. Arak Bok represented the old Mongol traditions, nomadic rule from the steppe. Kublai represented the future, settled rule, blended with Chinese governance. In 1264, after years of war, Kublai Khan emerged victorious. But it came at a cost. The Mongol Empire was now fractured. In 1271, Kublai declared himself Emperor of China, founding the Yuan dynasty. He was now not just the Khan of Khans, but the Son of Heaven. He adopted a Chinese-style court, wore Chinese robes, minted coins with Chinese script, and ruled from a new capital, Dadu, modern-day Beijing. Yet he never gave up his Mongol roots. His empire was a fusion, Mongol discipline with Chinese sophistication. Conquering the Song was no easy task. The southern Song had a formidable navy, well-defended cities, and millions of loyal citizens. But Kublai's generals adapted. They built their own fleet, studied southern terrain, and slowly squeezed the Song from all sides. In 1279, at the Battle of Yamen, the Song navy was annihilated. The young emperor of the Song, just a child, drowned in the sea, and with him, over 300 years of Chinese imperial history ended. China was now fully under Mongol control. Under the Yuan dynasty, China experienced a unique fusion of cultures. Persian engineers, Muslim doctors, and Tibetan lamas came to court. Chinese Confucians served in local administrations. Mongols held top military and governmental positions. Society was divided into classes: Mongols, Central Asians, Northern Chinese, Southern Chinese, the former Song subjects. While this hierarchy caused tension, Kublai attempted reforms to bridge the gap. Kublai's reign wasn't just about conquest. It was a golden age for science, art, and trade. He expanded the Grand Canal, improving grain transport. He restored roads, supported scholars, and promoted paper currency. His empire connected China to Persia, India, and even Europe. And into his court came a man who would make the Mongol Empire famous across Europe. In 1275, a young Venetian named Marco Polo arrived at Kublai's court. He served the Khan for 17 years, traveling across China as an envoy and administrator. Marco described Kublai as the greatest ruler on earth, wise, generous, and awe-inspiring. His tales, later published as The Travels of Marco Polo, introduced Europeans to the wonders of the East: gunpowder, paper money, silk cities, and a ruler like none they had imagined. Kublai practiced religious tolerance, continuing the Mongol tradition. He supported Buddhism, especially Tibetan Lamaism, Islam, protecting mosques and scholars, Christianity, allowing churches, Taoism and Confucianism, giving them status and land. Yet he also kept a close grip on political dissent. He used secret police, censors, and surveillance networks to ensure obedience. Despite his achievements, ruling China was never easy. Natural disasters, floods, famine, disease stirred unrest. Heavy taxes to fund wars and palaces angered peasants. Southern Chinese elites never fully accepted Mongol rule. Several revolts broke out, suppressed brutally by Kublai's generals. Still, cracks were forming in the foundation. In his final years, Kublai was consumed by grief and illness. His favorite wife died. His beloved son and heir passed away. He grew overweight, isolated, and paranoid. Kublai Khan died in 1294, aged 79, having ruled for nearly 4 decades. With his death, the Yuan dynasty began a slow decline, and the Mongol Empire, already fractured, would never be whole again. Kublai Khan's legacy is monumental. He was the first non-Chinese emperor to fully rule China. He blended Mongol force with Chinese tradition. He made Beijing a world capital and opened China to the world. But he also sowed seeds of division, favoring Mongols at the top, alienating native Chinese below. Still, his reign remains one of the most fascinating in Asian history. He was a conqueror who became an emperor, a Mongol who wore Chinese robes, a grandson of Genghis who built a capital of marble and gold. Kublai Khan did what even his legendary grandfather could not. He tamed the Dragon of the East, and in doing so, he changed the face of China forever. By the time Kublai Khan died in 1294, the Mongol Empire had reached its zenith. From Korea to Hungary, from Siberia to the Indian Ocean, it was the largest land empire in human history. But the cracks had already begun to show. The empire, once a united machine, was now splintered into khanates, each ruled by different descendants of Genghis Khan, often at odds with one another. The empire had broken into 4 major parts: the Yuan dynasty in China, Kublai Khan and his heirs, the Golden Horde in Russia and Eastern Europe, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, the Ilkhanate in Persia and the Middle East. These regions, once loosely bound by the authority of the Great Khan, began to act like separate empires. They traded, warred, and made independent alliances. What began as a confederation of conquest slowly devolved into divided dynasties. Succession disputes plagued the Mongols. From Ogadai to Mongke to Kublai, every new death triggered a power struggle. Unlike Genghis Khan, later rulers didn't prepare clear lines of succession. Nobles and generals took sides. Civil wars erupted. These wars didn't just waste blood and treasure, they fractured the unity that made the Mongols unstoppable. In China, Kublai's successors struggled to maintain power. Court intrigue worsened. Natural disasters struck. Inflation spiraled out of control due to over-reliance on paper money. Chinese resentment grew. The Mongols had never fully integrated into Chinese society. They remained a ruling elite, foreign and separate. By the early 1300s, revolts began to stir, and in 1368, a former monk and peasant named Zhu Yuanzhang led a successful rebellion. He founded the Ming dynasty, forcing the Mongols to retreat back to the steppe. The Yuan dynasty was over. China had cast off its foreign rulers. In Persia, the Ilkhanate also collapsed. After the death of Abu Sa'id in 1335, no strong heir emerged. Regional governors fought for control. The Black Death further destabilized the economy. Local dynasties reclaimed independence. By the mid-1300s, the Ilkhanate had dissolved into chaos, with Persia fragmented once again.
The Chagatai Khanate, which had ruled Central Asia, also splintered. Religious divisions between Muslims and traditional Mongol shamanists caused unrest. Turkic identity began to grow stronger than Mongol heritage. By the 1340s, the Khanate broke into western and eastern halves.
It became a shadow of its former self, ripe for the rise of a new power, Tamerlane. In Russia, the Golden Horde once seemed unshakable, but by the 1350s, succession struggles weakened the Khans. The Black Death devastated populations. Russian principalities like Moscow grew stronger. In 1380, at the Battle of Kulikovo, Russian forces dealt a symbolic blow to Mongol dominance. Though the horde would linger for another century, its aura of invincibility was gone. By the 1500s, it had splintered into smaller khanates, eventually absorbed by the rising Russian Empire. One of the greatest invisible weapons that contributed to Mongol decline was plague. The Black Death, carried along Mongol trade routes, spread across Asia and Europe in the 1340s. Tens of millions died. Economies collapsed. Faith in rulers shattered. The same connectivity the Mongols had created, roads, trade posts, ports, also allowed disease to travel at an unprecedented speed. The empire's greatest strength became a terrifying weakness. As time passed, Mongol rulers in different regions assimilated into local cultures. In China, they adopted Chinese bureaucracy. In Persia, they became Muslims. In Russia, they merged with Turkic and Tatar traditions. In Central Asia, they were replaced by Timurids. Eventually, the Mongol identity diluted. Their languages faded. Their traditions blurred. Genghis Khan's name remained. But the people who once ruled the world no longer existed in their original form. As the Mongol Khanates fell, new empires rose from their ashes. The Ming dynasty in China, the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East, the Russian Empire in the north, the Timurid Empire in Central Asia. Later, the Mughal Empire in India, founded by Babur, a descendant of Genghis Khan. The legacy lived on, but the unified Mongol Empire was gone. It did not fall in a day. There was no single battle, no decisive collapse. The Mongol Empire dissolved slowly, like ice melting into rivers flowing in different directions. What once rode as one now stood as divided legacies. But even as the empire died, its imprint endured. The steppe had gone quiet. The thunder of hooves, the whistle of arrows, the cries of conquest faded into memory. But the world they changed would never be the same. Borders redrawn, empires born and broken, cultures forever altered. Genghis Khan's empire had fallen, but the earth still trembled where it once stood. The Mongol Empire is no more. Its borders have vanished. Its Khans are long dead. Its horses no longer thunder across the earth. But Genghis Khan still lives. Not in body, not in bone, but in borders, in laws, in culture, in blood. He lives in every nation his armies crossed, in every system his rule influenced, and in every whisper of wind that rolls over the empty steppe where he was born. He carved an empire that spanned over 9 million square miles. More than 50 modern nations were touched by Mongol boots. He defeated kingdoms, crushed dynasties, erased cities, and reshaped entire civilizations. His tactics are still studied in military academies. His leadership is still debated in political science classrooms. His name appears in both the top 10 conquerors and the top 10 genocidal leaders in history books. Genghis didn't just conquer. He governed. He created the Yasa, a secret but strict law code. It demanded loyalty above all, absolute obedience, harsh punishment for theft, betrayal, or rebellion, religious freedom, and protection for merchants. He outlawed kidnapping, torture, and even the slaughter of animals without good reason. Though the Yasa faded over time,
It planted the seeds of imperial rule of law across Eurasia. The Mongols are often seen only as destroyers, but they were also builders of a connected world. Under Genghis and his successors, the Silk Road flourished like never before. Caravans crossed deserts under Mongol protection. Paper, printing, gunpowder, and noodles traveled west. European goods and ideas traveled east. He established a postal system, passports, and relay stations, centuries before modern governments. Some historians call it the First Global Age. For a man raised in the tribal, superstitious world of 12th century Mongolia, Genghis was remarkably progressive in religion. He believed in the great blue sky, the eternal heaven above all men. But he allowed Christians to build churches, Muslims to build mosques, Buddhists to teach, shamans to chant. So long as they did not threaten his rule, they were welcome in his empire. The Mongol Empire was a bridge between Islam and China, between Europe and India, between nomadic life and imperial administration. Mongol rulers learned to govern not just by sword, but by paper, by pen, by prayer. In China, the Yuan dynasty restructured society and bureaucracy. In Persia, the Ilkhans supported science and art. In Russia, Mongol rule helped birth the centralized autocracy that would one day become the Tsardom of Russia. In 2003, scientists discovered a startling fact. 1 in every 200 men alive today shares Y chromosomal DNA that traces back to a single man in 13th century Mongolia. That man? Likely Genghis Khan. Through dozens of wives and concubines and centuries of royal descendants, his genes spread across Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and even parts of the Middle East. He may be the most successful biological father in human history. But not all legacies are noble. Tens of millions died in the Mongol Wars. Cities were wiped off the map, some never rebuilt. Cultural treasures burned. Populations were displaced. Slavery, rape, and terror were tools of his conquests. Historians estimate 40 to 60 million people died due to Mongol campaigns, roughly 10% of the world's population at the time. Genghis Khan was a visionary and a killer. In the West, he is often seen as a barbarian, a symbol of destruction and death. In China, he is both feared and celebrated, the foreigner who became emperor. In Russia, he is the shadow behind centuries of Mongol domination. But in Mongolia, he is a god hero. His face is on currency. His statue rises 130 feet above the grasslands. His name is on schools, streets, airports, and vodka bottles. Children learn his history as a source of pride. Genghis Khan is Mongolia's father, warrior, protector, and prophet. What do we make of a man like Genghis Khan? He united tribes through blood and oath. He shattered kingdoms and built an empire. He embraced religious freedom and enforced brutal punishments. He was both enlightened and ruthless, a ruler of vision and a warlord of violence. He is too large, too complex, too contradictory to fit into a single label. He is not a hero. He is not a villain. He is something deeper, a force of history. Imagine this: the cold Mongolian wind, a sky that stretches forever. No walls, no borders, just open land. This is where it began. A boy named Temujin, abandoned, hunted, starving, climbed a hill, looked at the horizon, and decided he would never be small again. He became Genghis Khan, Not by birth, not by blood, but by will. He forged his people into an unstoppable force. He changed the world, not once, but again and again across centuries. His name echoed in fear, then legend, then memory, and though his empire fell, his story never ends. Because every empire we know, every border we draw, every history we tell, is shaped somewhere in its shadow by the man who once ruled the world. If this journey into the legacy of Genghis Khan moved you, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because this is just one story among many still waiting to be told. Hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for walking this path with us. And may history always keep you curious. We'll see you in the next chapter of time.